So, is it true that the First Amendment protects blasphemy, disinformation, or misinformation, and defamation against public officials and figures? Well, I will dig deeper into all of this in a moment. Having studied the assigned materials, I've gained a better understanding of free speech in the First Amendment and how and why it protects all the rights that it does. This is something that I believe is very interesting, and I want to share what I've learned with you. There are a few fundamental aspects of free speech that people should know, including that the First Amendment protects some forms of expression but not others, government interference, and the right to freedom of religion. Now I will start my discussion. The book personally brings up many important points about blasphemy or the idea of blasphemy and why the First Amendment protects it. So it covers many points in the book, so I'm going to be discussing some of those points. So to start, on page 197, it states how blasphemy is a stigmatizing term. They emphasize the term stigmatizing a lot in this chapter. They say blasphemy is a stigmatizing term for expression that challenges prevailing religious orthodoxy. So this has to do a lot with religion, the idea of religion, and how lots of people practice different religions and how that could be a problem. What this means is that blasphemy refers to either expression or speech that is regarded as either offensive or disrespectful to someone's religious beliefs. For instance, there could be someone who believes in God and another who goes against that belief. Freedom of religion is very important here, as it is a First Amendment right to begin with, because, interestingly enough, religion is based on beliefs and how to express those beliefs. And blasphemy is simply challenging those beliefs, which is then a form of expression. Blasphemy is to be against a belief or a story rather than the idea of God itself. And because of that one person who believes in God expresses it in any way towards another individual who may not believe in the same thing, it would strongly offend that other person due to the offensive remarks made by the opposing person. Because the opposing person has said something highly offensive about God, for example, or anything cruel against that person's belief, then that is pretty much regarded as blasphemy. It explains on page 197 that anyone should be able to exercise or practice their beliefs, whether it's religious or not, or without any interference from the government. So the government should not be able to interfere with those beliefs or what people have to say about those beliefs, regardless. So now I'm going to be explaining to you how this is because it is regarded as an essential human right, which enables people to live based on their own faith without being discriminated against. So they should be able to practice whatever they want to practice, like religiously, without anyone having authority over them. According to the book, restrictions on blasphemy are incompatible with individual freedom. Let me explain why. This is because they limit the right for one to express their own opinions as well as their beliefs. And blasphemy also has a connection to free speech under the First Amendment. I believe that even when speech is both belittling and hurtful to many diverse religious groups, or any religious groups, the government is forbidden or is simply not allowed to censor it because of the type of role it plays in the First Amendment. Next, I'm going to touch on why the First Amendment protects disinformation or misinformation. So to start, on page 188, it states that, consistent with the emergency principle, the First Amendment may punish false speech when it directly, immediately causes specific serious harm. Important examples of punishable false speech include defamation, fraud, and perjury. Those are the examples that it provides, and I think those are very good examples. The term disinformation is broadly used to describe false or deceiving speech that cannot be punished constitutionally because of the possible harm or harms that it causes. Things like defamation lawsuits and copyright are good examples of disinformation as well. In terms of defamation lawsuits, though, there are a couple of things that hold their place in such a case, like false claims or public figures. On page 189, it states that a May 25th, 2021 NPR story quoted an individual named Mike Gonzalez as stating, "I feel that Black Lives Matter is one of the greatest sources of disinformation. They have manipulated the good nature of many people." He says that this following his belief that BLM's leadership publicizes some sort of radical plan, as well as the manipulation of people with good intentions, in order to achieve their own goals or upheaval in society. One of the major impacts of disinformation is harm to one's well-being, because that can really affect who someone is or their well-being. This is because it can lead to things like emotional distress or mental health problems or issues that include anxiety or stress to one's own person. I believe that the First Amendment protects misinformation following the marketplace of ideas, because I thought the marketplace of ideas plays its own part in this in some way, and I'll explain why. So, I say the marketplace of ideas plays its part in this because this is for an individual who can lead, who can and is able to express and exchange ideas, whether or not they're false, whether or not they're true or false or whatever, for open debate. Since the First Amendment generally prohibits the U.S. government from restricting false speech, misinformation is therefore protected by the First Amendment. This certain protection is related to the idea that free expression, even if when it includes false information, is a basic right, regardless of whatever happens. And lastly, there is defamation against public officials and figures. On page number 203, it states, in its landmark 1964 New York Times v. Sullivan decision, the court for the first time applied First Amendment and standards to state defamation law, which governs false statements that injures someone's reputation, causing demonstrable financial or other harm. This page of the book mentions that the court recognized that civil damages actions for the defamation tort could have harsh and discouraging effects on speech that surpass the stifling impacts of criminal prosecutions. One of the most important reasons the First Amendment protects defamation against public officials and figures is because it puts the idea of public debate first as a priority, and then comes the criticism of people who are in the public eye. So many people in the spotlight will get criticized regardless. Therefore, in order for someone to file a defamation lawsuit, some sort of public figure is required to show or prove that the comment was made with what is called actual malice. So actual malice is very important because you need proof to be able to prove someone's point, false, whether it's true or false. So to wrap up, is it really true that the First Amendment protects blasphemy, disinformation or misinformation, and defamation against public officials and figures? Well, you have the answer. The answer is yes. Having studied the assigned materials, I've gained a better understanding of free speech in the First Amendment and how and why it protects all the rights that it does. To sum up, I believe that the First Amendment should continue protecting these rights because it preserves many important principles or ideas that are necessary to a free society.